Hello and a big warm welcome to you. My name's Marion Rose.
And I'm Lael Stone.
And today is part 2 on the food and feelings theme. So we're going to be focusing more on children this time, last time being more the focus on adults. If you haven't listened to that one already, we invite you to go and listen. As you were saying in that one, it can be really important if we are tending to this in our children to have actually given ourselves some compassion and to inquire within about what's going on for us first. So you might want to go and, if you haven't already listened to that, perhaps you'd like to pause this one for now and go back to that one.
I think I really like how we did it in 2 parts, because I think what we talked about in our last podcast is so vital in understanding our own story. And I think our own relationship to food, what we were imprinted with, perhaps the messages we're giving our children. As always with aware parenting, we look at where is the child, but also looking at where are we as the adult. So I agree with you, Marion. Really great to go and listen to that first, because then that might give you a bit more understanding about perhaps what you're bringing to the beautiful relationship with your child, and food as well can be just another piece of the puzzle.
Yes, and with so much compassion. I also want to say a little preface, no, that's not the word, but for this whole topic, I think it's probably one of the most emotionally loaded topics of all, food and feelings, for many, many people anyway. So we would like to bathe you in unconditional love as you listen to this.
Yeah, because it's so vital, isn't it, that we talk about compassion all the time. Like, people probably go, God, here they go again. They're talking about compassion.
How many seconds did they get in before they started talking about it?
But I just so deeply feel, I know you do too, we cannot heal those stories in the past and the ways we judge ourselves if we don't have compassion. And as you say, food is such a powerful repression mechanism. What we talk about in aware parenting is what we do to avoid feeling. And food is just, it's so ripe. It's up there with technology and food and alcohol and all those kind of things. It sits so beautifully in the place of, I don't want to feel this, so what can I do to kind of numb those feelings or distract myself, all those kind of things. So it just does require so much deep compassion for ourselves, as we've talked about in quite a few of our podcasts around repression mechanisms. We're doing it to protect ourselves. We're doing it to keep ourselves safe. And so, we can't address it with any judgment or criticism. We have to address it with compassion of, I'm doing something here. And that's such a beautiful lens to look at when it comes to our kids as well. And a lot of the questions we've got around our children having repression mechanisms and using food, to not make our children wrong, but to come to it again with compassion of, there's something else going on for them, and that's what they're using. So yeah, we really invite you to listen to this with compassion for yourself, and also through that, looking through that lens to our children as well.
And I'm also love to know, thinking about food. I mean, for many things, they can be things that we use to meet a need, and they can be things that we can also use to suppress our feelings. So control patterns being another name for that in aware parenting. And if I think about food as well, it's almost like 3 core things. There's, we need it to live. So of course it's highly emotionally loaded around survival needs, and as we talked about last time, in terms of our lineage around food, and pretty much in any ancestral line there would have been fear around, is there enough food to eat to survive? So there's all of that emotional loading there. There is pleasure. I mean, food for so many of us, and at certain times, can be incredibly pleasurable, enjoyable, and delicious and yummy. I mean, even the words that we're using. And it can be one of the most powerful ways that we use to suppress our feelings. I mean, it's incredibly powerful, in terms of all the different ways, the physical movement, the chewing, the sucking, if you're having a smoothie, whatever it is, the hormones, the chemicals, all the things that are actually in food. So, the fact that it's these 3 things, it can be used at any time by any of us. We can move in between these 3 different core relationships. I'm sure there are others as well, but for me that helps to also go, of course it's going to be emotionally laden, because look at those 3 things, 3 of the biggest things we can think of. So if we didn't mention it before, lots of love and compassion.
So, I mean, in this episode, we want to address some of the questions that we got sent in. So we might kind of dive into to that? I mean, I would really love to just start because we love sharing stories. And I have shared this on our podcast before, but, before I knew aware parenting, my default when my first two children particularly were little was whenever they got upset, I just used to offer them the breast all the time. I just used to breastfeed them all the time. So even probably when they didn't ask for it, but they look grumpy, I just kind of, here, go have a drink. I didn't know how to be with feelings, and that was okay. Like, I was doing the best job I could. And so really what I developed, particularly with my middle child, was quite a strong control pattern around when she was upset, she needed something to eat or needed something sweet. So when I finally weaned her when she was 2 years of age, whenever she would start to get upset, she would always ask for a treat. And I think before I came to understand aware parenting, I would try and distract her from it, or I would give her treats because it would make her happy. And then I began to realize, as I uncovered, as I began to discover aware parenting, oh, wow, actually, there's just a whole lot of feelings there. And so I wanted just to offer that as a story for parents to say, it's okay. Like, we are all doing the best job we know how. And as I look back now, for my middle daughter particularly, food or sweetness was what she wanted when she got upset. And when I started to work with that with her when she was about 4.5, and instead of actually giving her sweets, but just sitting with her and helping her with her feelings, it actually began to shift quite easily when I addressed what was going on underneath. So I wanted to just share that as right up the top to say, there's no judgment here, and we're all doing the best we can. And, I definitely had that experience with food as a control pattern with one of my kids. And then it moved into something else. And, we all are very clever at trying to keep ourselves safe. So we all do all these beautiful things. So again, more compassion to yourself and to your children if that's what's happening for you. So should we start with a question, or did you want to say something?
Share a story as well. But I'd love to say with my daughter, I also gave her a very big breastfeeding control pattern, despite knowing about aware parenting right at the beginning. And I also want to echo what you said, is that through over a little bit later years, when she was like 2 and 3, I really helped to release that. And I remember we actually played a game at one point, and so she was about 3 years old, I think, maybe, yeah, she would have been about 3, maybe 4. And we play a game where we'd connect in, like before when we sat down to eat, and I'd say to her, how do you feel in your tummy? What feelings do you feel? And then as we were eating, we'd both do it, not just her. And she had so much more exquisite sensitivity to what she was actually feeling in her body than I did. So I was like, oh my gosh, it really can shift from this massive breastfeeding control pattern to exquisite sensitivity. And she's 19 now, and she has such a healthy relationship with food. It's so beautiful to witness. So I love sharing that as well, that it's whatever age we are. I mean, we shared last week, I used to have big food issues, and I don't at all now. So we really can shift whatever age we are, whatever age our child is. It's not too late to shift these things.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's start with a question here. First question was how to guide young children to eat for hunger rather than feelings. All right, I'm going to throw that to you, Marion.
Yeah. Well, this the thing is, children learn that from how we respond to them. And I'm sorry to say, but that's right from when they're babies. And I know this can be really challenging. So again, whatever you've done, whatever age your child is now, it's always possible to change that. But it's really the more we can respond accurately to what actually is going on for them. So the more we understand when they're hungry, to feed them, and when they're upset, to not feed them, and to listen to their feelings. That is how they will learn, because basically they internalize how we respond to them. So how we respond to them as babies and as children becomes the exact way they respond. And Aletha doesn't talk about it like this. Aletha is the founder of Aware Parenting. The way I think of it is, if a baby is hungry, if a baby's upset and they need to cry, and perhaps they've got some birth feelings they want to tell us about, and because of our own experience, we think they're hungry. So perhaps they're crying a lot and it's evening, and we feed them and it's 4, and then it's 4:30 and it's 5, and we keep feeding them because we think they're hungry, which of course is part of this culture. the way I think of it is the sensation that they have, which is, I feel upset, which might be, you know, tears in their eyes, you know, wherever the sadness is, or the stress from the birth, the maybe overwhelm, perhaps there's fear, whatever those feelings were. What I imagine is that they interpret those when we feed them every time, and that could be the same as a 2-year-old. They're feeling upset, and we keep thinking they're hungry, and we keep giving them more food, is they learn to interpret that sensation in their body as, oh, I'm hungry, because that's the response I get. So it's literally kind of a pairing of an internal sensation and an interpretation based on how we respond to them, which is why it can be so tricky sometimes when we are supporting our children, when we start to understand this more, and we go, oh my gosh, actually, when they're asking for cookies every time they fall over, or you know, every time they get tired, which is when upset feelings bubble up, they want to eat, is we start to understand what we've done, and we're trying to then disentangle those things so that they get that accurate sense of, this is actually upset feelings. It can be really tricky because they're literally almost creating new synaptic connections, that these sensations in the body actually don't mean hunger. They actually mean a desire to cry, need to cry. So I think that can be really helpful if we're going to talk about all the ways that we can respond. We perhaps say, offer a loving limit. I'm not willing for you to have any more of that, sweetheart, and I'm right here and I'm listening, and I really hear that you want another cookie, and I'm not willing for you to have any more, sweetheart, and I'm here and I'm listening. Is that they might have really big feelings, no, but I'm really hungry, I want more cookies, because literally that's what we have shown to them, that's what they internalize. So I think it can be really helpful to hold that. That's just the thing that I've come to. So as I said, it's not a leftist thing, but I think it can help to realize the bigness of what we're doing. We're literally rewiring, and again, we'll often do that as adults. I talked last time about rewiring. I couldn't differentiate between hunger and tiredness. Every time I felt tired, I would think I was hungry, and I think a lot of people do, because again, in this culture, what do we do when babies and children are upset in the evening? We think they're hungry and they need to eat before they sleep. So it's big, but we can untangle those and actually create the accurate relationship, so that they know, back to the question, that they eat when they're hungry, and when they're upset, they know that their feelings are welcome. That was a long answer. I'd love to hear.
No, I agree with you. I just wanted to say too, for those of you who are listening who perhaps have babies and you're like, hang on, what does this mean? And, you know, because we're massive advocates of breastfeeding and meeting your baby's needs. You know, we did a podcast, Babies Part 2, you know, that you can go and have a listen to, because we talk a lot more about it in there, just differentiating between that hunger and listening to feelings, and absolutely always meeting your child's needs first. And I know that can get lost in translation. So I just want to remind everybody, please go and listen to that, because we are absolute big fans of, of course, you've got to meet your child's needs. And we're not saying don't feed them.
Breastfeeding, actually, what we'd love to say, and we did say it there, is that actually, if we listen to a baby's feelings as well, breastfeeding can actually become even more enjoyable, because they're even more present, and they're not doing it, well, they're doing it less as a control pattern. So it just becomes a more enjoyable experience. And we both breastfed for a long period of time. We love it. We support it. We're big fans. So thank you.
And I think also too, like, I used to find, before I knew we're parenting, with my first two, if they were upset and I tried to feed them, they would suck a bit and then they'd arch their back and pull off and then suck a bit more, and it was uncomfortable, and it wasn't a relaxed baby feeding because they were hungry. Like, it was really different. But I would be furiously trying to feed them and then think something was wrong. And sometimes, and really, I look back now and go, oh, they just needed to, you know, be heard and listened to. And then with my third, when I started doing with her, if she was upset and in the times where I was unsure, I would go to feed her and she would arch her back or pull off. And so then I would listen. And then after I'd listened to her feelings, then I would maybe offer to see if she wanted to drink, and she would beautifully, and she would be relaxed. And, you know, and that might've been half an hour later or an hour or whatever was going on. But there was such a difference between when I was using it to try and stop the feelings, and then when she'd expressed herself, and then, you know, she was feeling, you know, she was actually either hungry or, you know, whatever was going on then. So yeah, it was beautiful to just see the differences within that.
I'd love to say more. I think this is so important. Aletha talks about this in the Aware Baby. So if you have a baby and you'd really like to start to differentiate between when a baby's hungry and when they need to, when your baby's hungry and they need to release, she has a whole chapter on that, and there's a whole section, and we talk about that a lot. And if you want help from an aware parenting instructor, you know, there are really clear ways that we can observe a baby, and aware parenting is all about observation. So it's not just about, I think this, it's about observing our baby or our child or our teen, listening to ourselves, trying something out, and then observing them again. And that babies, children, they really clearly show us things when we know what to look for and we know how to understand what they're telling us. So that example is so beautiful, isn't it? And again, why then when we differentiate out like this, breastfeeding can become even more enjoyable, because when we're feeding our baby and they're hungry, they're relaxed and they're enjoying it, we're making eye contact, when they're having a cry in our arms, they're having a loving cry in our arms, and it's powerful and incredibly intimate and touching, and there's much less of that, either the on and the off, or the falling asleep. Or I know so many mums experience, if breastfeeding is a big control pattern, that the baby seems to be not really connected with them. It's more like a thing to stop the feelings, which it does. So it becomes less about a beautiful relationship between us and our baby and more about them trying to suppress their feelings. So it actually can make it much more wonderful, although it's not necessarily easy.
That's true. Yes, wonderful and not easy. Yeah, you know, as we're learning, because as we always talk about, we bring our own story to it, what happened to us as a baby. Oh, there's so many pieces to it. So yeah, be kind. Let's be compassionate again to ourselves as we do it. Now that leads us into another beautiful question.
Can I go? I'm so sorry. I want to keep going back to this question. So I want to go back and say, so how to guide young children to eat for hunger rather than feelings is, if we have given our child, if by the time they're young, we have breastfed them or bottle fed them to suppress feelings, which pretty much all of us will have done because we didn't, you know, this knowledge is fairly new. It's often a lot less about talking or thinking. I mean, it may be some about that. It may be asking them, sweetheart. I mean, I remember again with Lana when she was about 3, and if she was asking for food and I thought she was probably actually upset rather than hungry, and I'd say, do you want food, sweetheart, or do you want a hug, or do you want to tell me how you feel? So of course it is about that, but again, it's so often about our response, and that we can increasingly observe our child. And there's often a really clear sign if they're eating or if they want food to suppress feelings, is there's often a different quality about it. And it's the same with any suppression of feelings, whether it's a screen or food or you know, just buying something or doing something. There's a quality of urgency about it. There's often like, no, but I really want. Paradoxically, hunger, unless of course you're starving, which is unlikely, it has a different quality. So we start to observe, and again, we're really observing our child, and we're the ones who differentiate. And by us getting clear and responding aptly, that's one of the ways we do it. So it's not just about a thinky thing, it's about how we respond. And we'll be talking about that, whether we move in with attachment play, whether we move in with loving limits. It's so much about our response to them, just as it was when they first learnt, is this hunger or is this upset feelings?
I love that you spoke into that. Like, that's just reminding me that my middle child always used to whine when she wanted a treat. Can I have a treat? Like, there was always this whining quality that really, I look back now and go, oh, she's just like, the feelings were just, you know, they were bubbling on the surface there. And she was just using that as the, I don't want to feel these, so can you give me something sweet? And, you know, you're so right. The quality that goes with it in the asking or what they're saying is something definitely to look for. Yeah, great point. Okay, next question. I'd love to understand whether the open approach I've heard both Marion and Aletha talk about is effective if you know there are pent-up feelings driving some of the food preferences, fussiness. Is it recommended to do lots of listening first, or not worry about the feelings and always give maximum choice around food? It's a good question.
I love that question. And I want to say, in terms of what this questioner is asking about, the approach is aware parenting is really based on trusting our children. And part of that is trusting that they know innately exactly what food they need. They know when they're hungry, or they would innately know if we responded, and we clearly could read those things right from when they were little. So often what happens is then those things get overridden by really the conditioning that we've given them. So in Aletha's books, I think in Beware Baby, she talks about kids, carrots and candy, which is a book where you can, it's about really trusting children's food choices and when they eat and how they eat and all of that. But exactly as in this question, if we have already given our children a control pattern that they have overridden, and that overrides that natural innate knowing that they have. So in that case, it's not just going, yeah, sure, have whatever you want whenever you want it, because so often they will be eating from a control pattern. So then it's up to us, really. What we're doing is helping them regain that again, and not so often it was us that made them lose it, and again, without guilt or any kind of self-judgment. It's just we're actually helping them reconnect with that innate sense that they have. So yes, listening, touch and play, loving them. It's about us observing. The more we can clearly see, are they asking for food because they're upset, exactly as you were saying, the more they can reclaim that again. So it requires quite a lot from us to be really observant in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, also on that point too, of do we give them maximum choice around food? When I was in the thick of, serving food for 3 children and a partner, and I always used to think I'd hit the jackpot if I'd make something that everybody liked. But I would always give options and choices that everybody could choose what they wanted, knowing that there was, that's the meal perhaps I was cooking, and that there were choices in there that I knew that everybody would have some of. Some didn't like spicy stuff. If there was a phase there, some didn't like eating meat, some didn't like this, some didn't like that. So I would often always give choice within it. But I think what this listener is asking too is sometimes children can absolutely, I only want to eat spaghetti, right? And I'm not eating anything else. And there can be real resistance around that. And as we talk about, food is one of the few things children can control, particularly if they're feeling very powerless. Food and toileting is one of the things that they can actually have control over. So what we'd be looking for, again, exactly as you said, Marion, is how many feelings are there? Are they releasing them? Are they getting the opportunity to feel powerful in their own being? Do they have choice and autonomy around food or around other things in their life? It is about kind of looking at the different layers of perhaps what's going on that may be contributing to them going, I'm only going to eat this. But there also is, for some children, they only like particular foods, and some children don't like certain textures, and some children don't like different flavors, and that's so fine, because we're all human and normal. It's a really normal part of being human. I was sharing with Marion before we started, like my middle daughter, she only wanted to eat white foods for a while. So it's just rice and bread and chicken, and just I could maybe get a bit of cucumber in her. And for a while there, as I look back now, I could see what was actually happening. She was trying to control what was going on with her food, because we moved firstly from the breastfeeding control pattern to then the sugar one. And then I started, moving the sugar stuff away. And then it was more just about those foods. And as I worked more with listening to her feelings, and then we did lots more play around it, and then she became more adventurous in her own time, to now be an adult where she eats everything. She's got a far broader palate than what I do. But that can often be a huge concern for a lot of parents, is my children won't eat fruit, or they won't eat vegetables, or they won't eat this and they won't eat that. And I always come back to, firstly, okay, so let's look at where in their life first they maybe having some stuff where they don't feel like they have choice, or perhaps there's some feelings there, or can we work on all those beautiful foundation levels that we talk about first, and then see what happens with food. Even, sometimes sitting down to eat a meal feels stressful for children, and particularly if they've got big pent up feelings, if they've perhaps been at daycare or kinder or school all day and they've had a tricky day, it's very hard for children to sit at the table and eat, because there could be a whole lot of feelings in the way. And so do we need to help those move first? Or is there a whole lot of pressure when it comes to dinner time that we must eat together and you should eat what's on your plate, or there's big feelings from mum or dad or whoever the adults are around food? Like, there's all those things that can contribute to a child not wanting to feel comfortable or relaxed or eating freely. So I think it is really good to just be looking at, okay, what else could be going on here? So yes, perhaps your child does have some sensitivities around food. How can we still give them choice and autonomy about what they're having? How do we not make it wrong? I guess we can really subtly make it wrong if they don't eat that vegetable or don't eat that piece of fruit. Where are we sitting in that? What can we do to, again, make sure our child feels as balanced as possible when they do eat, and then give them choice and autonomy in that? That for me is one of the first steps that we can do to help it be A, more enjoyable for everyone, and B, make sure our child feels powerful when it comes to eating food.
I love that, Lael. And I'd love to share as well another example around the whole power and powerlessness thing is with my son, who we listened to lots and lots of feelings. And so he was very present, and he had a hugely wide range of food, and really present and slow, and just, really, it was like this deep enjoyment of food. And then when his dad and I split up when he was 4, he went from that to an incredible powerlessness for him. And you think about children often in those situations, in so many situations where he felt really powerless. So he was not only showing that in hitting and headbutting, but his food choices dramatically reduced straight away to like really, really reduced food. So again, it was a really clear example for me. Yeah, exactly. If children feel really powerless, that is one way that they're going to try and actually feel powerful. One thing I wanted to know, I really loved as well, you talked about different children. So for highly sensitive children, it can also be a particular thing that they maybe don't like foods to be mixed together. They want to actually be able to really taste each type, or they don't want different textures mixed up. So they might really like food to be different foods to be separate on a plate, or they might like to choose from a selection in the middle of the table. So again, for each child, they're going to be different, and the more we can support them in having choice and autonomy, the more likely they're going to be willing to eat things that we offer.
And also too, I mean, that's a beautiful segue. We can just talk about for a minute around children that perhaps are resistant to eat or only want certain food, to bring play. This is where attachment play can be so beautiful with dinner time. So getting your child to eat you, or you pretending that you're scared of a carrot, and them trying to make you eat it, and you shrieking and then they're giggling. What we're going for is opportunities where there can be lots of laughter, where they are in control, where we can, where we are powerless sometimes, as in not we're powerless, but we are playing the ones that we're like, I don't like that, or don't make me eat that. And then they make you eat it. Letting them feed you can be hilarious as well. And they might get it on your face, and just taking the charge out of eating can be really, really powerful. I had a beautiful client who, there was, they had 5, 6 kids, and one of their children really didn't had some big feelings around food and just didn't hardly eat at all. And really there was a lot of stuff there around power. And, I suggested to her, what if you had a food fight and he was in charge of the food, like the food fight, he was the boss of it. And, with any food that you're willing to spare. And she's like, yeah, we had this massive food fight, and food went everywhere. And he actually ate more that night than he'd eaten in a long time, because there was laughter. We took the charge out of it. He was in control. There's all those things that we often talk about in this podcast around helping our children, feel powerful again, to allow them to again move into, eating, or move into ways that can feel more centered for them. Because it like so many things, whether it's food, whether it's needing to have a blanket, whether it's perhaps sucking thumb, whether it's something that they want to control or have, it's so natural for children to sometimes look for those control patterns, to use, and food is just one of them.
I love that you brought in attachment play. And if you're new to this podcast, attachment play is one of the key elements of aware parenting. Aletha has a book on it, and what it really does is to really facilitate and optimize a child's natural capacity to heal through laughter and through play. Children do it all the time. They're always trying to do that. And so laughter itself actually releases stress hormones from the body, and play, play does all kinds of things. It helps them learn, it helps them process, helps them release. So yeah, it's a really powerful thing to do. And I think often, again, so it's kind of the opposite of behaviorism. I often talk about that bigger picture, and behaviorism is that idea, if your child's not doing what you want them to do, then you make them do it either through a punishment or a reward. And attachment play is really the opposite of that. It's saying, if a child is behaving in ways that are challenging, actually moving in with more connection and more fun and more laughter so often supports them in releasing the feelings that are causing that behavior in the first place. So we have podcasts on that attachment play as well, if you want to go and listen to those.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, next question. I'd love you to discuss the theory and trust in a child eating a balanced diet for themselves, and on the flip side, witnessing them overeating and addressing this in a way without making them feel shameful.
I think we've really addressed so much of that already, and it's really just that is our innate physiology that we know. We've lived for millennia eating in fitting our environment, and I think it's really, in terms of making them feel shameful, is that it's never any. It's a similar thing. It's like if we were to go to a more behaviorist approach, we'd be telling the child, "No, you're not hungry, so don't eat now," or that kind of thing. And that isn't what it's about. It's actually us moving in the relationship to either move in with just connection and warmth and compassion, or moving in with attachment play, or moving in with a loving limit. So the difference between even subtle shaming or wrong making, or you shouldn't eat out, have you had haven't you had enough, and even subtle ways we can just move in and say, I'm not willing for you to have any more. Or if a child is just desperately wanting to go to the cupboard and it's clearly that they're upset, and they've had plenty to eat and they're just desperately trying to find some way to suppress their feelings, we might even just stand in front of the cupboard and say, "Sweetheart, I know you'd really love some more, and I'm not willing for you to have any more right now, and I'm right here and I'm listening." And they might say, "No, but I really want another one," and just listen and listen. And all those feelings that bubble up are the feelings that they were trying to squash down with eating, and as we said before, that we've really taught them to do. So there are ways that we can do it without shame or judgment being no part of it at all. It's really moving with love, compassion, attachment play, or a loving limit.
I think that's a beautiful point there. It's so much about our energy, isn't it? That when we set that limit, or we are playful, or we offer them connection, we're doing it from a place of not seeing that what they're doing is wrong, and keeping your heart really open and staying really open with our nose, and just saying, that's not what we're doing, and just being able to sit in that space. And really that just, it's so much about our energy that we bring to it. It really is. And that, I think, is the difference then between them taking on a story of, I'm wrong because I want to eat more food, or my mum wouldn't let me have food, or those kind of things, because we are actually holding the container of that beautiful energy of what's sitting underneath.
I love how you articulate that. It's so core, isn't it? And I think for that, we need to come back to our own, like the foundation of this paradigm, and what the core beliefs about human beings, and our innate desire to connect and cooperate and contribute, and to really understand that. And also, of course, to have done our own inner work so that we can move in that way, because we're not always going to be able to move in that completely unconditionally loving, present, aware space where we've got hours to listen to feelings or do attachment play. But even if we do some of the time, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, next question is, every time my daughter feels stressed, she wants sweets and food. We now talk about those feelings, but whenever she goes to her dad's, he gives her food treats when she's brave or good. How can I work with her through this? I restrict her food, but I feel guilty for doing this. But if I don't, she would eat and eat and eat. She gets teased for being fat by other kids. How do I deal with this? What can I do to support her?
First of all, lots and lots of love and empathy to you. And I would say, if you haven't got an empathy buddy already, there's a wonderful free Facebook group where you can come and connect in. There's also Carolina Valencia, is that her surname? Never can pronounce it. Sorry, Carolina. She has a great Facebook group where you can actually connect in with an empathy buddy. So it can be really helpful to actually have someone to listen to your feelings, or an aware parenting instructor, or a counselor or therapist. Because I'm imagining seeing that happen at the other house you might have feelings. And the other thing is really attending to the guiltiness. I'm passionate about getting free from guilt. Guilt is just a form of self-judgment. So it's really understanding, as we were saying, that you can move in with loving limits, in a way that actually support the feelings. So basically, anytime a child wants to eat to suppress feelings, if we can move in with attachment play, they can release the feelings through laughter. If we move in with the loving limit, they can release it through crying. And then that's actually going to support, even if things are happening differently at the other house, you can still do that. You might also want to do some like role play kind of games. So that might be playing little characters, and there's a mummy and a daddy, and then there's a child, and perhaps bring some food in and see what she plays, because again, children know how to heal. They know how to heal. We just need to provide the environment for them and support them with that process. I'd love to hear what you think now.
Yeah, they're beautiful suggestions. And I think this comes up a lot with sometimes with clients I work with, of what happens in one house and then what happens in another, and whether feelings are shut down or they're not allowed to have them. And of course, we can't control what happens at that other house, but I often say, but we can hold space for whatever comes when they come back. And so even if you have mindfulness around that she wants to use food in this way, and that your job perhaps is just to keep holding those beautiful loving limits to allow the feelings to come out. Because if she's having sweets at her dad's house, then odds are she's probably just going to be pushing all those feelings down. And perhaps your opportunity is that she can come and bring all those big feelings with you. And like we talked about just before, it's our energy, that we bring to that. So to be, I know you want something, sweetie, but it's a no for now, and I'm going to listen. And really working on holding space for those feelings can be just such a beautiful gift for her. So even if she is still doing it at her dad's, that's perhaps what she needs to just navigate being at her dad's. And then when she comes back, she knows that that's what she can bring at your place as well. Yeah, it's very tricky when we witness our children having to do things in ways that we don't really like, but we feel a bit powerless about how that looks. It's really, really hard. And I love your suggestion about getting some listening time around that, because that's super important for the parent.
So
yeah,
you might also want to listen to our one last time, if you haven't already, where we talk about the really importance if our child's in an environment where there isn't the capacity or the understanding to listen to their feelings. Control patterns are really important things. They suppress the feelings, and they often keep them safe or protect them from being shamed. Or so again, if we can see that exactly as you said, Lael, that the wanting the sweets and the food is the way to stop the feelings being expressed there, and perhaps dad isn't able or willing to listen to feelings. So if we can see it in that way, like, isn't that a wonderful thing? Isn't that a wonderful thing that she can do that there, and that she doesn't need to at home, because at this home.
Yeah. And I think too, just that part about being teased by other children, that can be very challenging for all kids. They can be teased on all sorts of different things. And what we want to do is make it safe enough for her to tell you that. So when she comes home from school or from wherever she is at kinder, and you can see that upset, to keep creating enough safety for her to tell you how that feels. It must feel so hard when kids say that to you and tell me more. And our job is not to fix it. And, our tendency can to be, oh, but darling, you're perfect the way you are, and it doesn't matter. And we can really move into wanting to fix, which so comes from such a beautiful, well-meaning place, because we love them. But often the healing can come from just holding that space of like, yes, that sounds so hard, tell me more, and giving her the opportunity to cry and feel how upsetting it is can help to start shifting the feelings that are sitting there underneath.
So beautiful.
Okay. Just how to navigate when your child asks for food like chocolate lollies after they've just had a big cry, or we're told they can't have something and seems they are not hungry but just looking for comfort.
Again, I would say the same thing, a loving limit. So with loving limits, the way I see loving limits, we can either offer the limit and then the empathy, or we can offer the empathy and then the limit. So with food, I would often say that. So I would say if they've just had a big cry and then they're asking for chocolate or sweets or lollies, it probably means that there's still some more feelings there. They're like, yeah, I've done now. Can I have something?
Have a treat now.
And of course, if we don't have any much more listening juice in us, then of course we might say yes, or we might just say, sweetheart, I really hear that you like some chocolate, and I'm not willing for you to have any right now, and I'm right here and I'm listening. again, the same thing, if they've been told we're not willing for them to have something and they really want that, just a loving limit, the power of loving limits. We've also got an episode on that, I'm sure we have. We do, don't we?
Yeah,
Loving limits, so powerful. We can say no. A loving limit, we're saying no to behavior and we're saying yes to the underlying feelings causing the behavior. And it's just like such a miraculous, wonderful thing that we can do. We can say no, and it can be the most loving and wonderful thing, because we're then listening to the feelings that are actually causing that.
Yeah. This next question, which actually just talks more about treats, getting the balance of the treat type foods right without making it a huge deal when they have them. So not to go stuff themselves sick, so basically you can have access to it, but they don't binge it. So for me personally, what I have found with this is, once I learned a little bit more about feelings and control patterns and food and all that kind of stuff, there was access for my kids to, they could have access to all the food. So they knew in the fridge there was cut up carrots and cucumbers and celery that they could get, even the little ones. There was also, yogurt stuff there. There was also like little treats if there was. And so my job, or what I would look at, is I want to make sure each day that they're feeling connected, that they're moving their feelings. And when that was kind of my priority on some level, really just about holding space for them, they would go and eat really when they were hungry, and they would sometimes choose a treat, but they would often choose healthier foods first, or they'd have a tiny bit of a treat and still choose healthy as well. And so when we're talking about the balance, I think it ties into everything that we've been saying here, is that when kids aren't, carrying a whole lot of story, or they're not feeling, I'm finding it hard to talk today. They haven't got a whole lot of feelings on board. They're more likely to be able to just have a little bit, and that feels okay. They can find that beautiful center point for them where they're able to choose and not want to binge. Whereas, again, as we're saying, when there is a lot of feelings there, they're more likely to want to go for those sweet things. And for some children, food is not the control pattern. For some, it might be technology. That's a really good thing to just remember. Like, for some kids, you could have all the treats and food out there, and it's like, whatever. But they're really like, can I have the iPad? Can I have the iPad? Like, that's what they want. So this is, each child is different and unique. And I think it's being able to tune into your child and see where they are, and see what is it that, how are they today? Are they feeling in balance? Are they asking for more stuff? Do I need to set a limit, as we've talked about? Can I be playful around it? But I found over time, I always gave my children choice, and really my priority was to help them feel in balance as much as possible. And it never really became a huge issue, apart from when they became teenagers, and then they had all these amazing hormonal things, and all of a sudden they were like, give me all the carbs and sugar we can get. And I'd be like, really? And part of them would be like, yeah, it doesn't, part of them, I would watch them do this dance between, I just want to, because that's what I do with my friends. I'm hanging out and I'm eating this. And then they'd come home and go, can you make me a salad? So there was this one foot in each camp, which was kind of cute. And I was like, you're old enough to know like where that sits for you, so I trust you to figure that out. And by that time they did, and they could. So, but yeah, when your kids are little, it can definitely, it can feel a little more challenging, and really trusting that journey for them to choose what it is that feels good for them.
I'd love to share a couple of stories. One is, for a while, I really enjoyed, we had a shelf for each person in the fridge. So each person, when we go out shopping, they would choose what they wanted, and I'd prepare it. And if it was like all the veggies, I'd prepare them and put them in little glass Tupperware type things. And so they would go whenever they wanted to. And that was I really enjoyed that phase. The other thing I'm remembering is when I was in my mid-20s, I had a friend who had a child, and they were forbidden to have any sugar, but the parents would have sugar. So we'd go out to a cafe or a restaurant, and everyone would be having these delicious pudding, and the child was not allowed, in inverted commas, to have that. And what they ended up doing is they'd be looked after by someone else. And I remember them literally, they would go in the cupboard of this other friend, and they would get they had white sugar cubes back in the day. I don't know if even those exist anymore. And they would literally just crave and want to eat sugar. So I think the thing is to also remember is, I think it's really helpful that whatever we have in the house is that they get the same access to food. If they see us eating stuff and that we're not willing for them to have, that can create a real thing around or if we say you can have the sweet thing after the savory thing, we know all the research on rewards, that actually means that they're less likely to enjoy the thing that they need to have in order to have the sweet thing. So again, to actually understand some of those things that can set up the opposite of what we're wanting. So I think for each family, it's us deciding, isn't it, that what we are willing to have inside the home, and then whatever it is that we're willing to have inside the home, to really trust them to have those things, apart from, of course, if the previous bit we talked about around control patterns.
Yeah, and look, we still live in a society, like we have another question here about birthday parties and kids just hoarding the table and stuffing themselves with sweets, and just then the parents scolding them and saying don't say too much and all those kind of things. And the question here is how to successfully communicate the knowledge and reason for guidance towards healthy eating and marginal balanced sweets. It seems like the majority of parents are trying at 3 or 4 only to instill healthy eating, which proves difficult as the habits are formed already. I think, like we've touched on too, we don't want to make sweets and sugar and treats bad or wrong. They're not. They're just another thing. And as we've talked about, when our kids are feeling more imbalanced, when they are feeling connected to themselves, they can have some, but it doesn't have a charge around it. But our culture is still one that often rewards through sugar, it rewards through treats. You can have a lollipop when you go, not when you go to the dentist. Where is it? When you go to the doctors.
There are. So I remember some dentists were like, yeah. In
Like,
fact, I'd love to tell a little story here. They're totally off tangent, but I remember after I used to go to the dentist as a child, my mum would take me out for a donut afterwards, and I've had therapy sessions on that. And then more recently, I can't remember one of my lovelies to the dentist, and afterwards I was like, oh, should we go and get something? They're like, can we go get a donut? And I was like, no.
Oh, it's so funny, isn't it? Like, I think we still, as a culture, we use food as a reward. You do something brave, you'll get this, you get an ice cream, you get this. And I think the way I see it is that we don't, let's just normalize it. Like, some days I'm like, well, especially through lockdown, because it's been really tough here where I've been living, and when haven't been able to go anywhere. There's days where I'm looking at my, daughter, and we're all just sitting there going, oh, this feels really hard. And I'm like, we all need ice cream. Let's go get ice cream. Not so much as the reward, and there's no reason for it, but just let's go do something that feels fun and enjoyable. And we eat ice cream, and, we laugh, and it's good. And it doesn't need to be a thing. It doesn't feel as exciting. Let's go eat carrots. It was kind of, I still hear, that we want to use stuff as rewards. I mean, that's what our culture says. We use it as rewards. But I think, again, the energy we bring to it is it's just another thing. And it's, our relationship to it. And of course, we want to teach our children healthy eating, but we do that by modeling it. What do we have in our home? How do we feel about the food we put in our bodies? Do we criticize the way we look or our weight? Or all those kind of things. Our children are watching constantly. So they learn about food and healthy eating by watching what we do. You could even, for kids for young age, you can talk about all the amazing things that food does for us. This is what carrots do for you. And, if you eat spinach, this is what this does in your body. And this is what protein is. And you can talk about all these amazing things, and children learn about that to embed that understanding around food and how powerful and how amazing it is, and also how delicious it can be and how fabulous it is. Sometimes the sweet things are the most amazing, and sometimes this is the most amazing. And so much of it, again, is our energy that we bring to it.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. It really comes back to, remember those 3 things at the beginning that we talked about. I'm doing a triangle if you're listening, about the pleasure part. Is the more we have reclaimed actually pleasure with food and we really enjoy it, the more we can actually embody that, and we have that felt sense in our family environment, which also can mean, like, I know baby-led weaning is really often really popular with people in the aware parenting community. We can make food beautiful. We can, I know when my kids were younger, we'd have the plates, with the faces and shaping the food to make it fun. So there are ways that we can have, absolute pleasure. And food can be such a connecting, pleasurable, fun thing. And often, as I talked about last time, is the antidote to suppression or a control pattern is connection. So at any moment, if food is a control pattern, bringing in fun and warmth and connection can often flip it around entirely. So that's a really powerful thing that we have at our fingertips.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, there was just one more question we had here about struggle with encouraging good eating habits with a world that wants to shove a cookie or candy in my toddler's hand, which is what we were just touching on. Sometimes she's given things before I can even say no, and they don't ask. I don't know how to handle these situations. We only eat a model whole food diet at home in an effort to cultivate a healthy microbiome and gut health, but people won't quit throwing junk at my kid. I'm hearing that because, again, it's just like this is what society does. The holidays are coming up now. We have a Halloween event. How are we supposed to deal with all the unhealthy that everyone feels is their right to feed my child?
I'd love to say two things here. Number one, we still get to advocate. So there are certain things that we might have a really clear, strong no in our body for, that we're not willing for our child to have. So I know for me, when my kids were little, I actually wasn't willing for them to have like particular artificial flavorings and colorings, because I really knew that they had a big impact. So we didn't really do Halloween, but when they were a bit older, I would actually say a few of the things I was like, I'd love to swap it for something that's just slightly more, still a sweetie or a lolly, or chocolate, but it was just like a slightly healthier or organic, or just a bit less. So I think it's not saying we still get to be the parent, we still get to advocate, we still get to really stand in what we stand in. And I think that can be really helpful as well, is to actually connecting before we're with our child, maybe at Halloween. Perhaps if you're listening to this now, perfect timing, just a few days. Do you want to connect in with is there something that you really have a no for them? Or actually, sometimes also it can be like just, for one day that you feel really comfortable, just on occasional times, and just have anything and really trust that their bodies can handle it and they can process it. But I think it's really important for us as parents to get clear about what that is before we're then having the discussion with our child, especially if they're young. If they're older, we can perhaps have more of a two-way discussion about it. But
yeah, and that is, I mean, this also applies not just to food, but the way we talk to children, or the way we tell them they're good boys or good girls, or we'll tell them, if they do this, they'll get that. Like, our culture, just that's the kind of mainstream conversation. And it is challenging to learn how to speak up, as you say, for our kids, or to find language that sits okay with us, just to say, oh, I'm not willing for her to have that, or we do it a bit differently here, or, it can be really challenging as a parent to find the languaging that feels right for you in how you hold that with others. It's tricky. Yeah.
I love it. I'm not willing.
Mm.
I'm not willing. It's always a really helpful one. Thank you. And also we can say thank you so much. I really appreciate you. So, that's so, all the things. So offering appreciation to the other adult. And, we found that isn't very helpful for them, or, they have a headache afterwards. So we'd love to offer them something else instead, or if it's in-laws or grandparents, to communicate that as well. It can be really tricky. Lots of empathy. We're back to full circle to compassion. Lots of compassion.
Totally. And look, I'm just thinking about my kids. My oldest is he just has always been, from the moment he was little, loves food. He's got such a passion for food. He's a real Tory, and his love language is food. Like I remember when he went on exchange when he was 15 to France, and he saved up all his money so he could go and have good baguettes with with French cheese. All these other kids were going places. He's like, no, I'm going to a restaurant. Like, he loves food. And really appreciates it, and just he takes a lot of time and beautiful preparation. Like, he's a real, he gets so much pleasure out of it. And then, as I said, in my middle child, I only eat white food. I didn't want that. The third one probably is a bit more balanced across both. But I remember when they were younger and they would go to my in-laws, and my beautiful mother-in-law, who's Hungarian, and she'd make all these amazing Hungarian foods, but everything that she would get was so loaded with sugar, particularly sweets. Like, she'd give them a bowl of strawberries and pour sugar on top. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing? And I remember feeling a bit horrified, but I learned to actually let go, because I go, that's just every so often. And there was this beautiful, my kids still talk about, I think I said this in the other podcast, Nanny's cooking. Like, there's something nostalgic and beautiful in it around what that represented as a family. And it was challenging for me in the beginning. And then I learned to let go, because I actually just went, this isn't every day, and this is okay. And I know there's more balance in perhaps our house around those things, and that's okay. And, and it did teach me to pull back a little bit. But I also really do, hear and respect that if our kids are being fed stuff, particularly when they're little and it's not great, as you were saying, it's really important to advocate for what we want for our children. I mean, the flip side of that too, like I really swore when I had my first child, he would not eat sugar until, he was 2. He was never going to be in front of his television. Like I was really, really clear. Like I had really strong ideas of what happened. And by the time my third child came along, I remember walking in to the lounge room one day and there's a video on, like the kids have something on, and my kids are shoving like a treat in the 4-month-old mouth. And I was like, oh, okay. I remember just laughing because I was like, yeah, that's all right. I've let go of my expectations on some level, because I also know that they will grow up and I will deal with whatever comes, and they are quite robust. And, they often say that about sometimes with our beautiful first children, we're pretty hypersensitive and we're just protective and we want to do it a certain way. And by the time, your third comes along, you're like, oh, they're so crazy because they just got to fit in with the rest of the family and all the things that happened way before the others did, just because the older brother and sister are dragging them along to everything. So I think I remember sit her up so she doesn't choke. Like, just almost go, we'll be right. So I think you've got to have a dose also of just compassion and humility in it, and also just be like, oh, we all are coming from a beautiful place of wanting the best, and then sometimes we have to let go and go, okay, that's how that was then, that's okay, we're learning from that.
Oh my God, yeah. We start off very idealistic, don't we? And I think there's something beautiful about the idealism, and then there's something beautiful as we get more. Again, it's more trust, isn't it, in that the healing process. I'm also remembering when my daughter was 2, and she was offered a chuppa chup, those things, or the things on the sticks. And I wasn't there, and she'd been offered it and she'd taken it. I was so upset. I remember just crying and being just devastated that she had that one thing that. Over time we get to trust that, they're going to be fine with the occasional thing here and there. They
are, yeah, because we have to come back to what we are doing most of the time is the foundation. And so those things that may be not 100% what we want, but they happen every so often, are also okay. They're robust. It's not going to, we can have our own fears and projections of what that's going to mean. And sometimes, and look, I know that comes sometimes just with being a parent for a long time, and then just seeing, as they grow and actually how resilient kids are and what we can navigate. And so I think always, again, compassion for where we are in that journey. And I look at my third child, who is the most robust of all of them, because she was just got dragged around and had to sleep anywhere and got, food shoved in her mouth, and she probably didn't want it. And yet I did aware parenting with her, from the beginning, really, and all the listening and all the kind of stuff. And I see the impact of all those influences, actually, which are really, really rich. So
I did want to say as well, you talked about robust, and I do want to say we didn't really name it here, but also to acknowledge, of course, for some children do have food intolerances. They do maybe have disabilities or different abilities, or different neuroatypicalness, or all kinds of things. So apologies if you haven't had that sense of your child being included here. So of course every child is unique, and we need to take into account all of the things that are happening for them. So for certain children it is going to be more, we will be varying more on loving limits. And I've worked with parents over the years who've had children with perhaps food intolerance and things, and attachment play, again, can be really helpful, particularly paraversal games. So if children are needing to have medicines, or they're not getting to have things that other children are having, and lots of attachment play is so powerful and important. So sending even extra special love to you if your child's in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And look, as we've talked about today, food is a huge topic, and we can have a lot of feelings for ourselves as adults. It can, as we talked in our last podcast, what we were taught when we were younger, what our imprints were around it. And then, of course, our beautiful children, what they come in with and what's their story. So there's a lot to it. So be gentle, and if it does feel like a big thing, that's where we really suggest getting support from an aware parenting instructor or a counselor or someone who can listen to your feelings around it, because the more that we can lean into our feelings and our thoughts and beliefs around it, the more capacity we have, or we open up for healing, with our children around it. So yeah, it's a big topic.
Yes.
Anything else you want to add? What's your offering, Marion?
Oh, well, I was going to say, do you have an invitation or question or inquiry prompt?
How could you make food more fun? That's what I would love to say. How could we make sure that we bring pleasure and fun into food? What could you do for yourself or for your children or your family? What would that look like?
I love that so much. Mine's is there a particular food that your child really enjoys, and it's actually not so much a control pattern, but like really they have so much pleasure in having it, and are you willing to have that with them over the next few days and to really savor it and enjoy it and talk about it beforehand and just really enjoy it together?
Oh, that makes me want to go eat a mango. Mangoes are just so juicy and beautiful. I'm like, oh, I want to eat a mango. Like, amazing.
On hot days when it's like so juicy and yummy.
Yeah, beautiful. Great. Beautiful.
And offerings. What have you got at the moment, lovely Lael?
Just what have I got at the moment?
Have you started your immersion yet?
Yes, we're halfway through, almost halfway through.
You missed the immersion. Are you halfway through already?
Oh, we're at week 3 now. That's not halfway. We're getting there. No, there won't be another one till next year, probably February. But I just have my couples course, which is just the basics and the understanding of aware parenting and how that turns up for you as a couple, and just your different stories that you come with to parenting and how you can work together as a team. So that's my online offering. What about you, Marion? You've got a few beautiful specials or deals at the moment, don't you?
Yeah, I've got my 7-year sale at the moment, so come and check out. I've got things on sale every day pretty much. My Touch and Play course has got games in around food, and the other one I'd recommend is the Aware Parenting Babies course that Helena Mooney and I have. She's also an aware parenting instructor. That will be coming up on sale in future days if you're listening to this at the end of October 2021. So
yes, beautiful. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here again, and as always, if you have something you'd like us to talk about, please send us a message through Instagram or Facebook, and let us know if there's something you'd love us to discuss, because we love responding to your questions and what it is that is going to help and serve you to be the parent you want to be.
Thank you so much for listening, and so much love to you.